Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial video where we're going to talk about gearing. Now gearing is a question that keeps popping up and it is fairly simple to get it, but fairly complex to master it and does take a bit of trial and error, tweaking, all that good stuff. I'm going to go through my steps in this video. We're going to go through a couple of examples that you see here behind me and try to put it together with gearing to make it work properly. Now this video is aimed for beginners, so if you are more advanced, then this probably isn't the information for you. In front of you here, you have the three types of gears: the 1x1, the 3x3, the 5x5. I'm going to tell you right now that they're purely aesthetic. You can use either one of these three for the exact same thing. In earlier versions of the game, you had to use the right one for the torque coming out of your motor and they could damage it. That's all gone. So you can use the smallest one if you want every single time and it'll work perfectly. There are a lot of different guides on the internet, but this one just kind of summarizes it. What I want to show you is, you see here, the gear has a gear ratio, be it 2-to-1, 3-to-1, whatever. The point is, depending on the direction of your arrow, it will increase the RPS on the backside. So in this case, you read it 2-to-1 and you can see it's 2-to-1, meaning it's 2 times on the side here, on the back end of the arrow, than what is forward of the arrow, which is the engine. So in that case, your engine's 10 RPS, your propeller will be 20. On the opposite side, if you flip it around, it will do the opposite effect. So in this case, we can read it as 1-to-2, but technically it's still 2-to-1, it's just 1-to-2 in this case in front of us. But you see here that it's 5 RPS on the propeller and 10 RPS on the engine. This is also my favorite table to refer to, but this one is intended for when you're combining gearboxes. Now, of course, you can combine, stack them, put multiple gearboxes, but in this video, we're really going to be talking about just having one and perfecting that one singular gearbox. But what this does do is give us a nice visual representative of the various gearboxes from 1 to 3, as I mentioned, all the way to 1-to-1, all the way to 3-to-1. So you could see here in the 3-to-1 instance, we're multiplying by 3 in essence, whereas in the 1-to-3, we're dividing by 3 in essence. Now, you don't have to memorize the numbers, you don't have to even really know the numbers at all, but what you have to know is how gearing works in real life and how it applies to Stormworks. So imagine yourself pedaling a bike. Most of you, I assume, have ridden a bicycle before, and when you're pedaling a bike in a very high gear, if your bike has 12 gears, if you put it on the 12th gear and try to pedal up a hill, it'll go pretty hard. You'll probably be able to do it unless you have weak legs, but it'll be very difficult. Well, if you put it in a low gear, what happens? You spin your bike pedal around and around, and you make like 3 circles for every 1 circle of your wheel. That's called a low gear. But I bet your high gear on your bicycle got you a nice top speed when you were already cruising at a high speed. Enter the difference between a high gear and a low gear vehicle. So, just very basically, the vehicle, the car, will have a high gear allowing a top speed, more speed, less torque. Whereas something like this haul truck will have a low gear, meaning you get more torque but less speed. Now, of course, both of these vehicles have multiple gears, but that's not the point. Even if they were one singular geared systems, a vehicle or a car would aim towards being a higher gear setup, higher gear ratio, whereas something like this is a lower gear ratio. Now, there's other types of examples too. So a low gear ratio, such as this, which gives you more torque, less speed, better for large propellers on ships that need force, better for heavy vehicles that need acceleration, better for generators that need steady, slow rotation, constant rotation going through the thing. Now, a high gear setup, more speed, less torque, so your engine spins slower, but whatever you're trying to output on spins faster. So in this case, it's better for aircraft propellers that need high force or high RPM. They're better for speedboats, race cars, things like that. So in this car, you have an automatic drive mode, but if I do put it on manual 1 and start driving, it's going to be able to hit very high speeds. The revolutions here, as you saw, are pretty much going rising, obviously, but as we are going faster and faster, we can kind of stop them. So you see here, first gear, second gear, third, fourth, fifth, we're dropping the RPS and we're gaining speed. So that's how this car works and how a lot of cars work, and speedboats and things like that. Well, in our truck scenario here, yes, you can get up to a top speed, that's not the problem, but it's more aimed on the side of torque. So you want to have torque. You watch the wheel here in the front as you accelerate. There's a large amount of torque lifting up this vehicle and making it move the way it does. Forget about top speed. We don't need top speed here. Now, the best way to understand gearing is to explain it as the middleman between an engine and between whatever you're trying to put out through it. So in this case, just a very stylized example in the case of a propeller, and I'll make it yellow just so you can see. So you have your engine, you have your gear, and you have whatever your output is. So gearing is a balance between the two things. Gearing is always a balance between the two things. And really what it is the translator between your engine strength and your output, whether it's wheels, tracks, propellers, generator, whatever. So you have a relationship between these two things. So depending on the power applied by the engine and whatever is coming out of it through the output, the gear is that translation. Now I'm going to change the gear color just so you can see the arrow. So that's kind of the basic way to understand a gear. And in the case of the bicycle example I gave earlier, your legs are the engine and your bike wheels are the propeller, and you have the bike gears. Now there's BMX bikes that don't have gearing, that's fine. That's actually a one-to-one system. In that case, it's purely what goes out of your motor or engine goes into your propeller, and that works. That will work. But gearing serves a distinct importance and has a role in being that translator, as I mentioned. So in the case of the gear itself, you have to imagine if the engine is too weak, low gear can help provide power into translating it. However, if your engine's too weak, you may not reach the goals you need. That's a different story, but that is part of the relationship here. Now, if the output spins too slowly, a high gear may help increasing the speed, but the engine has to have enough power. So in the bicycle example, if your legs are strong, sure, you can start riding the bike off in a high gear. But if your legs aren't strong, then you'll want to put it into a lower gear. It helps the engine if it's weak. Higher gear, it helps if the output is spinning like crazy. So that is the balance and kind of the translation of that. Now, you find the right balance, it'll ensure efficiency in the game without overloading the engine. In this game specifically, we don't like when our engines are much higher than 20 RPS. You want to keep the engines below that, otherwise they start to overheat. So using the right gearing will help in that. Now let's take a look at our examples here. So I do have a gear. I am just going to delete it and put a single pipe for now. So we're going to see what happens in this helicopter example when we don't have any gears. So we can fire up the engine, and you could see the engine is having an RPS of 20. It's kind of maxing out. And in theory, without a gear, our rotor is also at 20. Now, if I try to lift off in this scenario, it's not going to allow me to lift off because we need a gear to translate that engine RPS into propeller RPS. So what do we know from that earlier relationship that we saw? Well, the engine itself can be at a low RPS. In theory, we want it to be in a low RPS, But what we don't want to be at a low RPS is the propeller. So the arrow should be pointed towards the engine. Quick refresher course, we want this to be higher than this. So we point the gearbox toward the engine. So we have our gearbox. Yes, it has to be plugged into the electricity, but now we can go here into select and go in here. Now we don't need to change the gearing in the sake of a helicopter. Think of a boat or a car. You'll want to have a reverse gear or negative gear, but we don't need that. So we can just ignore the ratio on. Now the ratio off is the one that concerns us. So what I like to do in this case is max out this. So what this allows is the engine to be spinning, for example, at 10 RPS, and then it goes through here. The propeller should be at 30. All right. Obviously, if the engine's at 20, this should be at 60. So in this case, if we fire up the helicopter, you can watch the helicopter's already taken off. And we're hovering at 12 RPS, which is beautiful. We don't waste a lot of fuel in this case. It's quite optimized and efficient. And the helicopter is flying. It's off. That's all we really need. Now, between this, we've solved it. So this helicopter is completed in terms of the gearing. Just to quickly show you what happens if you have the gear in the wrong direction, like this, that means now, whatever the engine is, this will be 3 times less. If we fire this up, you can see the engine starts to redline, and the rotors are barely spinning, and we're never going to take off in this. It just won't work. So you have a gearing problem, and you see the engine is at 20 redlining. That means the propellers are at 6.66 repeated, and that doesn't give us the torque that we need to take off in this case. Like I said in the beginning, the car is a little bit different because the car has a series of different gears doing all kinds of different stuff, and it's not fair to say we need one singular gear. But for something like a tractor or a slower vehicle, we don't need that many gears. Now you'll need one so you could have that reverse gear I talked about, but you don't need to have a series. Now I just went ahead and deleted all the gears in this case. Let's see what happens if we try this car with no gear. So we can accelerate, and you see that it is accelerating and hitting a top speed. Now normally in cars you'll never have a single gear system. That's why you have them in sequence and kind of changing up as you go. So I would say this works. This is pretty good. Now if I just quickly jump to this version, you'll see that I have different positions. So these ones are actually facing away from the motor. 3 to 1, 2 to 1, then 9 to 5, 6 to 5, and then all of a sudden they face back in towards the motor. And as you'll remember, when it's facing in towards the motor, that means that whatever is coming out its back end here into this area, into the wheels, is going to be a higher RPS. So we start off in a low gear and end up in a high gear. Now, just for your information, I'll show you. This is just my pure reverse gear, 1 to 1, negative 1. And then it goes 3 to 2, 9 to 5, and finally 6 to 5, 3 to 2. So you can try these sequence of gears in your creations if you want. I'm not going to explain how to make a manual or automatic transmission here, but just know that you want gears to make your system work better. Jumping back to our example that had no gears, let's say we want to make this car behave more like a tractor. So that's something that is slow but has a high torque. All right. So let's put this gear, we'll connect it to electricity, and we will set let's max it out. Let's go 3 to 1. So now what we'll note by looking at this thing is that whatever is coming out the back is going to be much higher than what's coming out of the engine. So in this case, we're actually putting such a high gear right off the bat, more speed, less torque. You'll see what happens. When I go to drive, it won't even be able to go because it's struggling to pick up speed. Now, maybe eventually we'll pick up the speed, but this is the equivalent to you pedaling your bike and up a hill on a high gear, and you physically cannot do it any faster than this. You're stuck. So you have two options in this case. you can either increase your engine strength, and that will be like increasing your leg strength, or you can change the gear. For visual purposes and for demonstration, I'm going to flip this thing around. So now, what's happening? Where the arrow is not pointing, that's the higher gear. So now what we're ending up with is, in essence, a system where the engine itself can be 20, and here it's going to be less and less and less. So now we're creating that very low gear. You're pedaling a million times, it seems, on your bike, and you're only going so slow. But it's easy going. So here, the second we accelerate, you could see we're pretty much doing a burnout right away. And obviously the car starts to slip out. So in this case, you'd for sure need to have a maximum speed, and probably in the case if we were building that proverbial tractor, you wouldn't have high speed but high grip wheels. And the changing of these wheels, again, pretend it's not a convertible sports car, pretend it's a tractor or a quad or something. So you could see it has a nice pull right off the bat, and if you don't need a top speed, you just limit your top speed to this. And if you're happy going 30 kilometers an hour but having a nice wide range of torque, then this setup is for you. So again, not so much for a race car, but definitely something for like a loader of any kind, forklift, or any type of machinery that doesn't need multiple gears, doesn't need to go fast, but just needs that nice steady torque. And this thing now seems like it can climb up anything. And now on to the boats. So boats have a different system. They have propellers, and with those propellers comes a speed. Now you don't have to have many gears in boats. Normally I don't have any, and sometimes if I really want, I'll have one, other than the fact you need a reverse gear. So I'm not talking about your reverse gear, I'm talking about going into a higher gear. So you can see my gearbox, I have two of them. I have this one and I have this one. They're both actually set to having some information passing through them, but let us delete them all. And let's just go under the assumption we've just built this creation, and now we want to see what to do. So with no gearbox at all, we have this boat. So we can fire it up and we'll add forward throttle. Now, I found boats to be pretty decent at having kind of, you can run with a 1-to-1 ratio with no gearbox in essence and end up okay. But you could see we are struggling a little bit here with the engine power, and we're not getting a great top speed. So let's put in a gear. Now let's pretend we forgot everything. We forgot everything about the arrows. We forgot everything with regard to more power, less power, whatever. Let's just place it arbitrarily. So we're going to enter here and place it arbitrarily, just like this. And let's connect it obviously to our battery. And now my advice is max it out. Go all the way. Go 3-to-1. Let's just see what happens when we go 3-to-1. So even without knowing which direction we put the arrow or gearbox or whatever, right away you could see the boat is struggling. We're hitting like 4 to 7 RPS, 5 knots. This is absolutely the engine being on a high gear. It's trying to get more speed, but inevitably we don't have an engine set for this gear ratio, and it's struggling. So obviously if we were doing like if we were doing like 100 kilometers an hour type thing, this would be fine. This would pull us along nicely, but it's no good as a starting point, and it's no good as a general gear for this vehicle. So where does that leave us? Well, let's spin this around now. Let's grab it and flip it around in the other direction. And now what we're going to end up with is a super low gear setup, something so torquey that it's going to just ride at a super high RPS. So you see that? It's hitting 20 RPS and 15 knots. Now it's not really giving us anything more than that, and I do believe I limited the RPS, but you can see just with this example that we've gained a lot of top speed. But one thing is certain, we've not gained a lot of top speed. So in essence, what it's telling us is even in this direction, facing into the engine, it's still causing not enough strength in our boat to push us forward at a top speed. So what do we do in this case? We add a second gear. Now in this case, pointed in the same direction, like it's following the path in the exact same direction. And what we're going to do is in this one as well, apply a 3-to-1. So now we have two 3-to-1 ratios. So now we're making it 9 times different. You just multiply the 3 by the 3, and that's actually that table I showed you earlier you can refer to and see that it's 9. But in essence, this gives even a weaker engine more power. Now you can see that that's not the case here. It's because I actually do have an RPS limiter. If I didn't have an RPS limiter and this was happening, that would imply that our engine cannot go higher than that 20. But now if we remove that limiter, this engine would probably be trying to go to 100. So what we're going to do in this case, we're going to remove this gear, so that wasn't the problem. Now we could start to tune this down. Now, remember what I said about starting at the extremes? Well, the extreme when this was flipped was worse than the extreme of this. The extreme of this flipped was actually not getting a top speed at all. It was struggling to get 5 knots. So now what we can do is go all the way to 1-to-1 and then maybe go 2 over, so 3-to-2. Let's try 3-to-2 and see what happens. Now solving these gearing issues is sort of like deduction, so you do have to apply some sort of deductional power to it and end up in a place where something works properly. But look at that. So in fact, this is now flying along probably too fast. We're hitting 37 knots at 20 RPS. That's perfect. And actually, that's why I did put a high gear on this boat originally, because when I hit that top speed, I want to actually change gears into a higher gear to allow us to keep going at a high speed without the RPS being 20 knots. But you can see the acceleration's pretty nice, pretty steady here. So we're climbing up and it kind of goes. Now one could argue that this is in fact too high of a speed and it's going to kind of lose control in a second here. So then what we can do is go back into our gearbox and tune this down to 6-to-5 now. With the direction of the gearbox, this should allow us to have a higher top speed with a lower RPS. Now it may struggle a little bit initially here. You could kind of see that we're not getting any higher than 9 RPS at 14 knots, so that's no good. Right away we can cross it off and say that that does not work with this engine. Power of deduction, let's jump back into the gearbox. Now instead of 3-to-2, let's try 9-to-5. So now if I accelerate, you can see that we're gaining a top speed. Our RPS are at 20, our knots are at 30 or so, and the boat's kind of steady. Now again, in this case I do have an RPS limiter, and more or less I can continue to drive like this forever, with the exception that my engine may overheat because we are kind of pushing it to its threshold. So that's again why I do have a high gear in this boat originally. What about the case of a large boat with mini propellers, mini engines, stuff like that? So you can see here we got 3 large propellers paired to 3 large engines. So in this setup, just for visual purposes, I actually did put the 3x3 gearbox and I removed the ratio we previously had. So let's pretend this is no gearbox at all. Let's see what happens. We can fire the ship up, sit in the seat, and now give it full throttle ahead. So you can really hear the RPS is like full on hitting that max threshold, and the speed is at 17 knots, but I don't like that. It's pretty unstable in my opinion. So in the engine compartment, we can increase this. Let's try 3-to-2. And let's see what happens if we move it to 3-to-2 while keeping the arrow pointed towards the engine. Generally, I found that with ships, you'll want to have the arrow pointed towards the engine, and the reason for that is because when it's pointed towards the engine, it'll keep the engine revolutions lower while keeping our propeller revolutions higher. Now again, that's assuming your engines are strong enough. So it's, again, a fine balance. If our engines are strong enough, then we do it that way. If our engines are too weak, then we're better off having it the opposite direction and have lower gearing. But in our case, we're having high gearing, and we're gonna see what we can do here. So we're gonna accelerate. And now you can see that our RPMs are stable and low, which is nice. We're at 10.5 while hitting a higher top speed. We're actually at 19 knots with a low enough RPS that we can pretty much have a wide, like, long range. We won't use a lot of our gas in this case. Now, for argument's sake, let's say we don't know what we're doing and we want to flip these around to run the test. What does this look like if we put this in the other direction? Because of course, if you don't really think about the arrows, the directions, any of that, you just want to see what does happen. So we were hitting 20 knots, we were at 10 RPS. Let's see what happens in this instance. So now, ooh, oh, look at that. We're maxing out our RPS and hitting a low speed. So right away, you can deduce that the previous setup was better. So we can grab these, rotate them back around, and then we can either leave it as 3-2 if you're happy with 20 knots, or we can try 6-5 and see what'll happen to the speed and the RPS. In this case, when we add the forward throttle, the speed hits up to 20, 21, and we have a RPS of 13 or so. Now that speed that we have is a little bit better. Is it justified to have almost 4 RPS higher for the same speed? Probably not. So in this case, I think I would actually use the other setup that we previously had instead of the 6-5. So there you have it. I've given you 4 examples of gearing. Keep in mind, if your engine's too weak, lower gearing. If your engine's too strong and pushing the output like crazy, use higher gearing. And keep testing until you strike a balance in what you're trying to accomplish. Now, there is no one rule fits all. It is trial and error. You do have to go back. I know sometimes gearing stresses me out because I will have the perfect creation, it'll be completed, ready to go, and all of a sudden it doesn't work properly. And maybe I took an engine from another vessel and put it into a larger boat, and now I have to adjust the gearing. So if you follow these steps, hopefully it helps you. Let me know in the comments what you found with regards to gearing in your own creations, how you make them work, if you have any other tidbits or useful information to share with everybody, and if not, hopefully you enjoyed this video. So thank you all for watching. A huge shout out to all of my Discord server boosters, and especially to my YouTube members. They get to enjoy special content and they do support me that extra little bit. But if not, if you can't, that's okay. Post a comment, share the video, tell a friend. It's all much appreciated, and I thank each and every one of you for watching these videos, for engaging, and for being a part of the community. Until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.